Your passport is fake. People like you don't belong here. The words cut the departure hall in half. Officer Mark Daniels held the slim maroon booklet like it was contaminated. A crowd of passengers shifted in line, craning to see. He didn't whisper. He wanted witnesses. His thumb flicked a silver lighter open with a snap, flame licking upward. In one practiced motion, he pressed it to the edge of the passport. Paper curled, smoke rose. Gasps scattered like sparks through the terminal. Within seconds, the pages blackened and collapsed into ash on the polished tile floor. The woman in front of him didn't move. She stood in a fitted orange dress, hair drawn back clean, no jewelry glinting, no designer bag to announce wealth. Only a slim black case in her hand, held steady. Her face was calm, as if this entire scene had been rehearsed long before he struck the match. Behind her, a younger woman in a short red dress laughed, high-pitched and careless, tossing her hair for the cameras already starting to lift. "Guess money can't buy class," she said, loud enough to carry. The sound sliced sharper than the smoke still rising. Mark ground the last ember under his boot and squared his shoulders. "Fraudulent! This isn't your gate, and it's not your country." His tone dripped contempt, not procedure. She inhaled once, slow, eyes steady. Still no words, still no protest. That stillness drew the room tighter. A man near the window raised his phone, recording. A teenager whispered to his mother, "Why'd he burn it? She didn't even fight." The mother hushed him, but her eyes never left the woman in orange. Mark barked again, calling for backup. The red-dressed passenger clapped her hands once, mocking, as if the humiliation were a stage play. "Security's coming," Mark sneered. "And you're not walking on any plane today, has it?" Yet the woman didn't flinch, not when he burned her passport, not when he called for handcuffs, not when strangers laughed. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was something else. Her lips parted just once, voice low, deliberate, cutting through the smoke. "You've just made your biggest mistake." The terminal shifted. Even travelers rushing for connections slowed, drawn by the gravity in her tone. Because it wasn't the voice of someone cornered, it was the voice of someone who had already won. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now back to her. Her hand slid into the black case, fingertips brushing a phone. She didn't rush. She didn't tremble. She moved as if time itself belonged to her. And for the first time, Officer Daniels hesitated. The woman in orange didn't chase the ashes. She didn't protest or bend down to salvage what was left. Instead, she stood still as the terminal churned around her rolling bags, boarding calls, the nervous shuffle of passengers who weren't sure whether to watch or pretend they didn't see. Her name, though no one here knew it yet, was Danielle Brooks, 44 years old, founder of Brooks Global Logistics, a multi-billion-dollar enterprise that moved cargo through half the airports on this continent. Today, dressed in an understated orange dress with her hair pulled into a simple knot, she looked like anyone else. That was deliberate. For years, she had traveled this way, no entourage, no chauffeur walking her to the gate, no jewelry clattering to announce power. Only a black case at her side and the stillness of someone who had learned the value of silence. She didn't hide her success. She tested the world with it. Because she'd been here before. At 21, she remembered waiting in line at a border checkpoint with a scholarship letter in her bag. The officer glanced at her face, then at the paper, then back at her skin, and said, "Step aside." She missed her connecting flight that night, slept on a bench, and carried that humiliation into every deal she made afterward. Years later, when she acquired a majority stake in an airport management firm, she told her board, "Never forget, dignity is the first cargo we should protect." But dignity wasn't what Officer Daniels saw when he looked at her. To him, she was just another face to dismiss, another problem to burn away. And so she let him perform his little ritual with the lighter. Because silence, when used correctly, is a mirror. It shows the crowd exactly who's wielding the fire. Behind her, the young woman in the scarlet dress shifted, lips curling into another smirk. She tugged at her hemline, pretending not to enjoy the stares she collected, but every laugh she tossed Danielle's way was bait for the crowd. "This is what happens when you fake it." A man 3 rows back whispered, "She doesn't look fake to me. She looks calm." His wife nudged him, eyes locked on Danielle's posture, tall, unshaken, hands resting lightly on the case. The officer's radio crackled. Backup was coming. Daniels glanced at her again, expecting panic. Instead, he saw only a measured breath, a blink, and a gaze that didn't lower. It unnerved him more than shouting ever could. Danielle tilted her head slightly, as if measuring the distance between patience and consequence. She wasn't just a passenger, she was the test, and the test had already begun. The echo of crackling radio drew more stares than the smoke still hanging in the air. Officer Daniels barked into his mic, his voice cutting sharp. Possible fraud, female passenger, stand by for detention. That was when the young woman in the scarlet dress made her move. She rose from her suitcase perch with a kind of theatrical flourish, her short red hem swaying like a flag. She stepped closer, heels clacking against the polished tile, her grin widening as if the entire concourse were her stage. "Unbelievable," she said, her tone dripping mockery. She really thought she could walk through here like she belonged. A few nearby passengers chuckled nervously, unsure if they were laughing with her or shielding themselves from the tension. Others looked down, embarrassed to witness it but not ready to intervene. Danielle's gaze never shifted. Not to the woman, not to the officer, not even to the growing crowd. She held her stillness like armor. Scarlett leaned in, lowering her voice but not enough to be private. Orange dress, cheap case, no ring, no watch, classic scammer vibes. I've seen it 100 times. Then, louder for everyone to hear. Guess you should have dressed better if you wanted to pull this off. Daniels smirked at the remark, emboldened. You hear that? He said to Danielle. Even passengers see it. You're done here. He gestured toward the security lane. Step aside before we cuff you. Gasps rippled through the line. A teenager lifted his phone higher, whispering, "This is insane." His father tugged at his sleeve, but the red recording light glowed anyway. Danielle's breathing remained steady. Her silence pressed heavier than any protest. "Ma'am, cooperate," Daniels snapped, his palm brushing the cuffs at his belt. "Last warning." Scarlett laughed again, throwing her hair back. "Oh, come on, officer. She's not going to cooperate. People like her never do." Her words were gasoline. Daniels squared himself, closing the distance. He tapped Danielle's shoulder with 2 fingers, not gentle, not violent, but dismissive, like swatting a fly. "Move." The hall stiffened. Several passengers exchanged glances, their eyes widening at the contact. A man near the customs desk muttered, "That's over the line." But Scarlett only grinned wider. "Finally, someone putting her in place," she quipped, clutching her purse like it was a front-row ticket to drama. Danielle tilted her head slowly, eyes locking on the officer's hand, still hovering too close. She didn't strike it away. She didn't step back. She simply held his gaze until his smirk faltered. Her voice, when it came, was quiet, calm, deadly precise. "This is where the mistake deepens." The words didn't shout. They resonated. The crowd felt it. Phones tilted higher. Even Scarlett's smile flickered for a fraction of a second before she forced it back. And in that charged silence, everyone understood. The scene hadn't peaked yet. It was climbing. Danielle didn't move. The officer's fingers had brushed her shoulder like a stamp of authority, but she let the touch pass into the air, weightless. Her eyes didn't flicker. Her posture didn't bend. Instead, she let the silence expand around her until the terminal itself seemed to pause. Passengers shifted uneasily. A toddler whimpered in its stroller before being hushed by a mother who couldn't stop staring. A businessman halfway through his boarding call stayed rooted, briefcase dangling from his hand. It wasn't the spectacle of the burned passport that held them now. It was the way this woman refused to break. Scarlett, in her red dress, tilted her head and laughed again, though this time the sound was thinner, strained. "Cat got your tongue? What, no excuses? That's what I thought." "Ugh." Daniels puffed his chest, mistaking Danielle's calm for defeat. "She's frozen. Typical," he muttered, loud enough for others to hear. "When the game's up, they go quiet." He leaned closer, the smell of lighter fluid still clinging to his uniform. "Let me make this simple. You're not boarding any plane today. Cooperate, and maybe we won't escalate further." Danielle's eyes didn't blink. She looked past him, beyond the cordon of uniformed officers beginning to gather, past the rows of check-in counters. Her focus wasn't here. It was somewhere higher, somewhere untouchable. She had learned long ago that raising her voice only fed the spectacle. At 25, when a loan officer in New York called her high risk despite triple collateral, she stayed quiet, slid the numbers across the desk, and let the silence work. Silence is heavier than shouting. Silence makes people hear themselves. And now, in this airport, that same silence worked again. Passengers began whispering, their tones no longer amused but uncertain. "She hasn't said a word," someone murmured. "Why doesn't she fight back?" Another voice countered. "Or maybe she doesn't need to." Scarlett's smirk faltered for half a breath before she forced it back. She tossed her hair, louder this time. "What are you all staring at? It's obvious. She's a fake." Yet her eyes flicked toward Danielle's stillness and then away, as if afraid to linger too long. Daniels slammed his boot on the ash scattered across the tile. "This is done," he barked. "You're done." He pulled the radio from his belt, calling louder. "Unit 3, expedite. Bring restraints." But the more he shouted, the smaller his power felt in the room. Each command ricocheted off the walls and returned thinner. Each threat chipped away at his own authority. Danielle drew a single breath, slow and steady. Her hand brushed the handle of her black case, but she didn't open it. Not yet. The move was enough to steady her stance, enough to remind herself, power doesn't need volume, it needs timing. Her silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. The crowd didn't know it yet, but the ground beneath Officer Daniels had already begun to shift. The silence didn't stay private for long. A faint chime broke it, the unmistakable sound of a phone beginning to record. 3 rows back, a young man in a denim jacket angled his camera toward the confrontation. His lips moved without sound at first, then louder, almost narrating. "This officer just burned her passport. Look, she hasn't even spoken." The red recording light cast a tiny glow across his knuckles. Daniels spun halfway, snapping, "Put that down. No filming in this zone." But the command rang hollow, because the crowd had already shifted. A woman near the stanchions raised her phone, too, catching the ash on the tile. Another lifted a tablet, capturing the officer's stance, his hand too close to Danielle's shoulder. Within seconds, lenses dotted the line like stars. Scarlett in her crimson dress folded her arms, feigning amusement. "Of course they're filming," she said, smirking at Danielle. "Drama always sells. You're about to go viral, sweetheart, for all the wrong reasons." Her laugh dripped like acid, but not everyone bought it. A mother with a stroller spoke up, her voice tremoring but clear. "Why'd you burn it?" "She gave it to you." "I saw." Heads turned her way, agreement flickering in murmurs. Daniels barked again, louder now. "This is an official security matter. Step back." His face flushed, not from authority but from exposure. He yanked his radio, repeating into it, "Unit 3, on the double. Detain all interfering parties." But the more he shouted, the steadier Danielle stood. She hadn't raised a single word since her quiet warning. She didn't need to. The crowd was beginning to speak for her. The teenager filming from the far corner whispered into his mic. "They burned her passport, and now they're threatening cuffs. She hasn't even raised her voice. This is insane." His live feed pinged comments. "Is this real? Where is this happening?" Scarlett scoffed at the attention. "Oh, please, don't believe her act. People like her, they scam. They slip through. The officer's just doing his job." But her words rang thin, bouncing back off skeptical faces. One passenger, a man in a navy blazer, called out across the hall. "Doing his job doesn't mean setting documents on fire." A murmur rose, heavier now, a tide of disbelief. Even the gate agent 2 counters down froze mid-check-in, eyes flicking between the scene and her computer screen. Danielle's stillness held, her breathing measured, her posture unbroken. She let the murmurs grow, let the cameras capture every angle, because she knew, once the crowd begins to question, the stage is no longer his. Daniels gritted his teeth, knuckles whitening on the radio. The authority he carried minutes ago had begun to leak away, not lost in her resistance, but in his own performance. And the witnesses were writing their verdict in real time, one recording at a time. The shuffle of heavy boots announced backup before anyone saw them. 2 more officers pushed through the waiting line, uniforms crisp, jaws set. They scanned the crowd, then fixed their eyes on Danielle. "What's the situation?" one asked, his tone clipped. Daniels wasted no time. "Fraudulent traveler. Tried to pass a fake passport. I neutralized it." He gestured toward the ash at his feet as if it were evidence, not destruction. "She's resisting cooperation." The second officer, taller, folded his arms. His gaze dropped to Danielle's black case, then back up to her calm expression, his lip curled. "Doesn't look like a real traveler to me." No luggage, no tags. Probably a plant. The scarlet-dressed woman chimed in eagerly, her voice sweet but edged. That's what I said. She thought she could just stroll into International like she owned the place. It's ridiculous. She laughed again, twirling a strand of hair. Passengers stirred. A man near the baggage carousel muttered, "She checked in. I saw her in line," a woman added. "And even if she didn't, since when do police burn passports?" But the officers weren't listening to bystanders. Daniels squared himself. "We'll take her to the holding room. Easier than making a scene." A scene. The irony hung in the air. The scene had already ignited. Phones were everywhere now, discreet at first, then brazen. The crowd wasn't dispersing, it was closing in. The taller officer stepped closer, his shadow cutting across Danielle's orange dress. "Ma'am, put down the case and place your hands where I can see them." His tone wasn't cautious, it was accusatory, as though every syllable confirmed guilt. Still, Danielle didn't flinch. Her hands remained exactly where they had been, one resting lightly on the handle, the other at her side. Her gaze tracked the officer, unblinking. Scarlett clapped softly, mocking. "Oh, this is good. Wait until they drag her out. Front row seat to Karma, M." The taller officer's partner pulled out a small plastic strap, the kind used for quick restraints. He snapped it once, loud enough for the sound to travel. "Let's not waste time," he said, moving toward her. Gasps swept the crowd. A young father holding his toddler raised his voice. "She hasn't even resisted. What are you doing?" His tone cracked with anger. Daniels ignored him. "Step back, sir. This is official protocol." But protocol wasn't what the passengers saw. They saw escalation. They saw a woman silent, unmoving, confronted by uniforms who grew louder with every second. They saw something familiar, too familiar. Danielle finally inhaled, eyes steady on the officer with the strap. Her voice, when it came, was quiet but razor-sharp. "You escalate because you're afraid, not because you're right." The officer froze mid-step, just long enough for the crowd's murmurs to thicken into outrage. And in that pause, the balance of power began to shift. The taller officer didn't appreciate hesitation, his jaw locked, eyes narrowing as if Danielle's calm were an insult. He stepped in fast, closing the last feet between them, and shoved her shoulder not hard enough to knock her down, but enough to claim dominance. Gasps detonated through the terminal. A woman dropped her boarding pass. A man cursed under his breath. The shove wasn't procedure, it was humiliation. Scarlett clapped her hands together with glee, laughter spilling like broken glass. "Finally! Someone put her in place!" she shouted, her voice rising above the murmur of passengers. She crossed her legs dramatically, as though watching a show. Phones tilted higher, lenses catching every frame. The officer's shove, Danielle's orange dress shifting but not folding, the plume of ash still on the floor. The teenager live-streaming whispered into his mic. "They just pushed her. She still hasn't resisted. This is insane." His chat lit up. "That's assault. Who is she? Where is this happening?" Daniels smirked, encouraged by his colleague's boldness. "You see? Quiet now. They always break when authority steps in." He reached again, this time toward Danielle's black case, as though seizing it would seal her fate. But Danielle didn't flinch. She held the case steady, her knuckles relaxed, her chin lifting by the smallest margin, her eyes locked on Daniels, steady and cold, until his smirk wavered. The taller officer barked, "Hands up, last warning." He raised the plastic strap, the faint snap echoing like a whip through the concourse. The crowd erupted in protest. "She hasn't done anything," someone shouted. "That's abuse," another voice rang. A flight attendant emerging from a side gate froze, wide-eyed, and whispered, "They're going too far." Scarlett only laughed louder, her voice cutting through the outrage. "Please, she's a fraud. If she belonged here, she wouldn't be standing like a statue." She leaned toward a passenger filming beside her. "Get this angle, this is what happens when you fake your life." Her words were gasoline feeding a fire already lit. The officer shoved Danielle again, harder this time. She staggered half a step, but regained her ground instantly, her heels clicking back into place as though rooted in marble. That silence again. No scream, no resistance, only stillness. And it shook them more than defiance ever could. Passengers exchanged looks, some furious, some horrified, some visibly trembling with second-hand shame. A man in a business suit muttered to his wife, "She's holding more dignity right now than any of them." Daniels leaned in close, voice low, venomous. You're not walking out of this terminal on your own 2 feet. For the first time, Danielle moved not away, not to resist, but to tilt her head ever so slightly, her eyes locking with his, and her whisper was sharp enough to cut through every noise in the hall. Every hand you lay on me writes the end of your career. The taller officer froze, his straps still raised. Scarlett's laughter faltered into an awkward cough, and the crowd, once murmuring, now simmered with the weight of something irreversible. The humiliation had peaked. The reckoning was about to begin. The strap still dangled in the officer's hand when Danielle moved not fast, not defensive, but deliberate. Her fingers slipped into the black case at her side and drew out a slim phone, the screen glowing cold against the fluorescent light. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't even glance at the officers. She simply pressed one icon and lifted the phone to her ear. "Activate protocol," she said, her tone low and surgical. The hall seemed to stop. The phrase carried no explanation, but it carried weight. The crowd felt it. The officers didn't. Not yet. Daniel scoffed, sneering at the device. "Who do you think you're calling, a lawyer? Go ahead. They won't get you through security." But the phone had already answered. A crisp female voice came through, clear enough for those nearest to hear. "Miss Brooks, line secured. All systems live. Do you require escalation?" The taller officer frowned. "Who was that?" Danielle's eyes never left them. "Yes," she said into the phone, calm, precise. "Escalate. Begin internal documentation. Timestamp this incident." Passengers exchanged bewildered looks. The man in the navy blazer whispered, "She's not calling family. That sounded like corporate." His wife leaned closer. "Who is she?" Scarlett rolled her eyes, but her smirk faltered. "Oh, please. It's probably some fake assistant. Watch. Nothing will happen." She laughed again, though thinner now, less certain. On the phone, the voice replied, "Understood. Initiating review. Notifying board-level contacts. Protocol 7 is live." "End." Daniels barked. "Cut the act. Put the phone down." He stepped closer, but Danielle didn't flinch. She simply shifted the microphone slightly away from her lips and said, without looking at him, "Every word you're saying is being logged. Every move you make is being recorded. Not by them," she gestured faintly toward the raised phones, "but by the system you work for." The taller officer's grip tightened on the strap. For the first time, his stance wavered. A ripple of murmurs swelled through the line. A flight attendant whispered, "Board-level contacts? What does that mean?" A teenager on live stream muttered, "This is blowing up chats saying she sounds like an exec." His feed pinged, "Check her name. Who is Brooks?" Daniels tried to regain footing, raising his voice. "You think calling someone changes the fact your passport was fake? You think it saves you from protocol? Wrong." He leaned closer. "I am the protocol here." But Danielle's gaze didn't break. Into the phone, her voice was calm steel. "Proceed to suspend all local clearances tied to Terminal B flag, every incident report under my authority." The response was instant. "Confirmed. Executing suspension. Do you wish to notify Oversight Committee?" She gave the faintest nod. "Yes, notify them. And log Officer Daniels' name first." Daniels' smirk twitched. His eyes darted to the taller officer, confusion creeping in. The crowd, sensing the shift, pressed forward slightly. For the first time all morning, the balance no longer leaned toward the uniforms. It was tilting. The terminal hummed with uneasy silence, the kind that follows thunder but waits for lightning. Phones hovered higher. Passengers leaned in, some standing on tiptoe, others holding their breath. Danielle lowered the phone slightly, not enough to end the call, just enough so her next words carried directly to the men in uniform. "You think you burned my passport," she said, voice calm, cutting. "But the only thing you burned today is your career." Daniels stiffened, but before he could snap back, the voice on the line filled the space again, louder this time, deliberate, like it had been routed through a speaker. "Attention, confirmation logged. Miss Danielle Brooks, Chief Executive Officer, Brooks Global Logistics, and majority shareholder of Metro Air Infrastructure Group." The name landed like a dropped gavel. Gasps erupted. A woman clutched her chest. A man in line whispered, "Metro Air? That's the company that runs half this airport." Another added, "Majority shareholder, she owns this place." Daniels blinked, his mouth opening, closing, searching for a retort. The taller officer faltered too, lowering the plastic strap a fraction. Scarlett froze, her red dress suddenly too bright under the fluorescent lights. Her smirk withered, eyes darting between Danielle and the crowd. Wait, what? No, that can't be real. She laughed, but the sound cracked. She's just bluffing, right? Right? But passengers weren't buying it anymore. A businessman pointed at the phone, his voice sharp. Didn't you hear that? They just said CEO, shareholder. She's not bluffing. The live stream teenager nearly dropped his phone, whispering to thousands now watching. Oh my God. She runs the company that owns the airport. They burned her passport. Comments flooded his screen. Fire them on the spot. This is history. Justice incoming. Danielle lifted the phone closer again. List every officer engaged in this incident. Effective immediately. Suspend their clearance. Confirmed, the voice replied. Officer Mark Daniels, Officer Thomas Green clearances revoked. Alerts sent to oversight and board. Protocol 7 escalation confirmed. Both men instinctively checked the badges clipped to their belts. Red lights flickered where green once shone, their faces drained of color. The crowd erupted, half gasping, half cheering. Someone clapped once, then again, until the sound spread like sparks catching wind. Scarlett staggered a step back, her confidence melting under the weight of collective realization. She stammered, I didn't know, I thought, but no one listened. Daniels tried to protest, his voice rising, cracking. This doesn't mean anything. You can't just. Danielle cut him off, her tone like steel wrapped in velvet. You thought silence meant weakness. You thought fire erased identity. But this terminal, this system, this moment, she paused, sweeping the crowd with her eyes, belongs to me. The words hung heavy, undeniable, and with them, the story turned. The revelation detonated like a silent explosion. For a heartbeat, the terminal froze. Every sound clipped midair, the roll of luggage wheels, the beep of scanners, even the shuffle of boarding lines. Then came the collapse. Officer Daniels stared at the blinking red light on his badge as if it were blood draining from a wound. His lips parted, but no words came. Officer Green, taller and usually unshakable, shifted back a step, his plastic strap hanging useless in his hand. Wait, no, Daniels muttered, voice shaking. This has to be a mistake, But his voice faltered under the rising tide of reaction. Passengers erupted in whispers that built into open outrage. She owns this place? They burned her passport? I got it all on video. Phones weren't just recording now. They were streaming, broadcasting every second to feeds climbing into tens of thousands of viewers. Scarlett, in her short red dress, backed away from the front of the crowd. Her smirk, her weapon all morning, vanished. She raised her hands as if distancing herself from what she had said. I didn't know she was... She caught Danielle's eyes, and the rest of the sentence evaporated. She lowered her gaze, cheeks flushed crimson deeper than her dress. The businessman in the navy blazer turned, facing the crowd like a commentator. They just humiliated the CEO of the company that runs this airport. His words lit a fuse. Murmurs became claps. Claps became cheers. Passengers who had been silent rose to their feet. Someone shouted, "Justice!" Another, "Hold them accountable!" The sound swelled, not chaotic but unified, like a jury delivering its verdict. Danielle didn't move. She didn't need to. Her stillness now spoke louder than their panic. The gate agent, who had been frozen behind her counter, finally stepped forward, trembling. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry," she stammered. We didn't know. We didn't." Danielle turned her head slightly, calm, almost regal. "You saw enough. You heard enough. That was all anyone needed." Daniels reached out a hand, desperate, pleading now. "Please, I didn't realize..." But his words drowned under the roar of recording notifications, under the clicking of passengers posting, under the chant that began softly at first. "Accountability! Accountability!" Scarlett shook her head, eyes darting to the exits, as if escape might save her from association. But every lens in the hall had already caught her laughter, her words, her smile at another's humiliation, and the world was already watching. Danielle lifted her phone again, her voice steady as steel. "Confirmation," she said. "All documentation is live, every witness accounted for. Proceed." The voice on the line answered, "Confirmed. Oversight has received visual and audio evidence. Stand by for execution of board directives." At those words, Daniels sank. His shoulders collapsed inward, his authority reduced to rubble. Green lowered his eyes, silent, gripping the strap like it might tether him to a job already slipping away. And in the crowd, applause swelled louder, first scattered, then unified, until the hall thundered with it. The humiliation that had been aimed at her had ricocheted back, full force. The applause hadn't faded when Danielle raised her phone again. She didn't shout to silence the terminal. She didn't need to. Her voice alone carried weight. Effective immediately, she said, each word steady, deliberate. Suspend Officers Daniels and Green from duty. Revoke all clearances. Remove their access to airport systems. The voice on the line answered without hesitation. Confirmed. Executing now. A chime cut through the hall. Both officers' badges beeped, then flashed red in unison. Their radios crackled once and went dead. Even their earpieces gave a sharp click of disconnection. The transformation was instant, visible, final. Daniel stared at the useless rectangle clipped to his chest. No, this isn't happening. His words stumbled out like broken glass. He slapped the badge, shook the radio, but nothing revived them. Passengers gasped, then erupted again, half in disbelief, half in vindication. Phones lifted higher, capturing every second. Green's knuckles whitened around the strap until it dropped from his hand, clattering to the tile like a gavel striking the floor. His voice cracked for the first time all morning. "Ma'am, I was just following—" "Silence," Danielle cut him off, her tone precise, final. "You followed arrogance. You enforced prejudice. That ends here." Scarlett took a shaky step backward, her heels wobbling. Her earlier laughter now echoed like a crime scene replayed on loop across dozens of screens. A woman near her muttered loud enough for others to hear, "You thought it was funny until it wasn't." Scarlett's cheeks burned, her eyes wet. She lowered her head, unable to face the judgment closing in. Danielle turned slightly, scanning the crowd. "Every bystander who raised a camera," she said, "is now a witness. Your footage joins the official record. Their dismissal is not only policy, it is justice." Cheers broke out, louder this time, the chant of "Justice" rising again. Daniels lunged one last time, his pride flaring. "You can't do this. I'm the officer here. You don't have the power." Her eyes cut through him like glass. "You burned my passport in an airport I own." The line dropped into silence. His voice died in his throat. The crowd roared, the sentence echoing like a verdict delivered. The gate agent who had trembled earlier stepped forward, her badge glowing green, untouched. She whispered, "It's done. They're locked out." Danielle closed her phone with a soft click, the sound small yet decisive. She didn't raise her arms in victory. She didn't need to. The weight of her authority was already written across the hall. Two men in plain suits, internal investigators, emerged from a side corridor, walking fast, their faces set. They approached Daniels and Green, flanking them without a word. One of them announced to the passengers, "These officers have been suspended pending review. Please clear the area." No one moved. Not yet. Phones still pointed. The world had already chosen its side. And Danielle Brooks, silent, unshaken, still in her orange dress, stood as the center of gravity, the only voice that mattered. The terminal was no longer a place of transit. It was a courtroom, and the verdict had already been handed down. Daniels and Green stood hollow, their badges dark, their radios silent, their futures dissolving in real time. The investigators guided them toward the side corridor, each step heavy with the weight of humiliation. Scarlett shrank into herself, arms crossed over her red dress as though fabric could shield her from the dozens of phones still aimed her way. A woman near her muttered, "You laughed at her, and now you're part of the evidence." Scarlett's face burned. She turned away, but there was nowhere left to hide. Through it all, Danielle remained unmoved. She didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She simply stood tall, the ash of her passport still scattered across the floor at her feet. She looked at the crowd mothers with children, travelers clutching boarding passes, young men holding their phones like shields of truth, and finally she spoke. "They thought burning my passport erased me, but all it erased was their authority." The words didn't rise. They dropped, heavy and final. The terminal hushed, then erupted in applause that thundered off the glass walls. A man in a business suit shouted over the clapping, "That's real power." Another voice cried, "This is justice." The chant rolled again, unified and strong. "Justice! Justice!" Danielle lifted her phone once more, her tone calm, steady. "Log the incident complete. Prepare the report for federal review. Ensure every recording collected here is preserved. And remind oversight this is why we built the system. Confirmed, the voice replied. Incident logged. Case closed. Oh. She lowered the phone and closed the case with a quiet snap. No theatrics. No need. The moment was already etched into memory, into feeds, into headlines that would spread by morning. Passengers began to approach, not close enough to intrude, but enough to show solidarity. A woman whispered, "Thank you." A man placed a hand over his heart. The teenager with the live stream grinned into his camera. You all saw it. She never even raised her voice, and she still won. Danielle turned toward the exit gate. Security staff who remained those untouched by corruption stepped aside, badges glowing green. Their silence wasn't fear, it was respect. She walked forward slowly, each step measured, heels striking the tile like punctuation marks on a finished sentence. Behind her, the crowd continued to clap, continued to record, continued to speak her truth into the world. And as the glass doors opened to the runway light, Danielle Brooks didn't look back. She didn't need to. Her dignity had spoken for her. Her justice had been delivered. And in the echo of that terminal, a truth rang clear. Power doesn't shout. It stands still. It waits. And when the time comes, it ends everything that tried to erase it.